The sense I've gotten from Justice Leveson and what he said is that he is determined that it's not going to disappear into the long grass, that we're not going to get a return to status quo, that there will be a number of specific changes, such as the conscience clause, we hope, and even Rupert Murdoch agreed that that was a good idea. Whatever the replacement for the PCC is going to be, because the PCC is finished. We've currently got what you could call the ghost of the PCC, because it broke up, yet it's still working, but it's not, it doesn't exist anymore effectively. So there will be a replacement for that.
I think it's absolutely vital that the post-Leveson, the press takes its responsibilities very seriously and lives up to the commitments that it makes. But at the same time, it's very, very important that we still have an independent, self-regulated press in this country. I think anything else would be bad for our democracy and our society.
I'd like to think that everybody would think a lot harder in the way that they actually gather news and make sure that it's always ethically and lawfully obtained. And you can already see that in the papers today. Certain scandals, you don't hear about them straight away on the front of various newspapers, where in the past I presume that phones would have been tapped straight away and they would have got that kind of information for you almost immediately.
I don't think the ethics of journalism are necessarily connected very heavily with the business of journalism. I think although the ethics are somewhat born of competition, it's between journalists to get a story, and clearly when people went far over the mark, it was somewhat in the name of the competition. I think the opportunity for journalism going forward is to create an ethical framework which works for us, and I think our readers and users expect us to come up with something which is ethically sound and accurate, and that's going to be one of the necessities for anyone who wants to compete in the future.
We hope that the outcome of this will be a number of measures that will empower individual journalists, empower the collective of journalists against editors and proprietors who seek to force them to do things that they shouldn't be expected to do.
To think that the post-Leveson newspapers journalists in general will adhere to the law, because essentially, to me, there was never a need for an inquest. It was a case of there are laws in this country, but they simply aren't observed, whether that's by police officers or by journalists.
I think to be popular in the future, if not now already, in fact, you've got to be ethical. I don't think there's any public appetite for some of the practices that went on in the past. I think that much is absolutely clear. So I think just as you could look back and say, well, there's a parallel in the food industry which went through similar changes through the 1990s, where people looked at the means of production and said, we're not interested in eating food produced that way. Well, I think people are no longer interested in consuming journalism that's produced in a particular way. They're horrified by some of the things that have come out during the Leveson Inquiry, and so they want to see change. And so for anyone that wants to be successful now or in the future, there has to be an ethical framework. It has, what we do has to have some ethical basis.
So the two main measures that we're campaigning for are a conscience clause in the contracts of journalists, which will allow them to say no if they're forced to do something that breaches whatever new regulatory code is in place, and not face the sack. And the other main thing is reform of the system of regulation to introduce a new independent form of regulation that is not dominated by the proprietors and the editors.